Good morning. My name is Lene Poe McDonald, and I am Associate Commissioner for Academic Relations here at the SEC. The Southeastern Conference, or the SEC, is a collection of 14 highly ranked universities that excel in academic, extracurricular, service, and athletics programs. With over $80 billion in economic impact, we understand that being on the forefront of any new and innovative way to address educational, societal, and professional concerns is paramount. Therefore, today's Generative AI Forum meets the moment, as we aim to do in all things, to address a very important concern to both our faculty and staff, and of course, our students and the communities we serve. At this time, I have the great pleasure to introduce Provost Joe Glover. Joe Glover is the provost of the University of Florida. He was instrumental in creating UF's initiative in artificial intelligence in 2020 and spends a lot of time advancing artificial intelligence initiatives at the University of Florida and throughout the SEC and nationally. He will explain more about the SEC's Artificial Intelligence Consortium and give a little background on why we felt this was something that was important for us to champion as a conference. Dr. Glover, thank you for being here today. Thank you to all of our attendees. We hope that you find this discussion both substantive and helpful as you wrap up another semester and get ready to begin preparing for a new school year next year. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. And remember, we hope that this conversation just means more.
Morning. Thank you, Lene. And let me extend my welcome on behalf of all of the provosts in the SEC to all of the participants and to the panelists. I would just like to take a moment to place this webinar in a slightly broader context. In 2021, the provosts in the SEC began to have a conversation about artificial intelligence and its importance to the universities in the conference. And recognizing the importance of artificial intelligence to our students, to our faculty researchers, to regional economic development, the provosts of the SEC all signed a memorandum of understanding about artificial intelligence, which is still in effect today. And basically, the memorandum of understanding commits the group to a number of things. These are sharing educational resources, such as curricular materials regarding artificial intelligence, promoting regional hackathons, promoting faculty, staff, and student workshops in AI and data science, sharing best practices among career resource centers, promoting this effort as a cooperative venture of SEC universities for the purpose of reputational enhancement and engaging with state and federal agencies, and for seeking joint partnerships with industry. So we began this process actually long before ChatGPT burst upon the public consciousness. We are a little bit out in front, and so we applaud the work of all of you and your interest in AI and ChatGPT in particular. We think this is an area that's going to be very important to the SEC universities, to all of the Southeastern United States, and indeed to the United States in general. One of the services that we think we are performing as a conference is to help build the AI workforce gap. We know that the United States is not building a 21st century AI-enabled workforce at the same rate as some of our competitor nations. It is important for the United States that we do so, and one of the best ways of doing so is by using our universities to educate all of our students about AI. So thank you again for joining this webinar. I look forward to a stimulating conversation, and please be assured that the SEC universities and the SEC provosts are united in furthering this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Provost Glover. So everyone, my name is David Reed. I'm the Associate Provost for Strategic Initiatives here at the University of Florida. And I'm also the inaugural director of the Artificial Intelligence Academic Initiative Center here at the university. As the provost said, we have been working together among the SEC universities to talk about artificial intelligence and share ideas. So I'm going to be your moderator for the next while, and we have some incredible panelists from some of the different SEC universities. I'd like to take a moment to introduce them. We have some questions that we have put together, but we also want to take your questions as well. So let me start by introducing our panelists. As I introduce them, if they could, go ahead and unmute and turn their video on, please. Thank you. So with us today, we have Dr. Jiaqi Gong. He is an associate professor of computer science in the College of Engineering and the director of the Sensor Accelerated Intelligent Learning Laboratory, SAIL. The SAIL lab focuses on convergence of human and artificial intelligence that spans the area of human-centered computing, as well as cyber and physical systems and smart and connected health. We also have with us Dr. Domenico Parisi. He is the executive director of data science programs at Mississippi State University and a professor of sociology. Dr. Parisi has secured more than $150 million to promote data science initiatives at MSU and beyond. He's nationally and internationally recognized for his work on creating digitally operated smart systems designed to improve the performance of government programs in education, workforce, and economic development. Dr. Chi-Ren Shyu is the director of the University of Missouri Institute for Data Science and Informatics and the Shumaker Professor in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department. He leads Mizzou's campus-wide graduate-level interdisciplinary data science training. His research is on explainable AI, biomedical informatics, and geospatial analytics. Dr. Asim Ali is the executive director of the Biggio Center for Enhancement of Teaching and Learning at Auburn University. He's the founding director of Auburn Online, a unit he still oversees. His academic background is in software engineering, information systems management, and adult education. In addition to all of this, he has full-time administrative responsibilities. He still teaches in the Harvard College of Business, the Department of Business Analytics and Information Sciences. Marc Watkins. Marc is a lecturer of writing and rhetoric and directs the newly formed AI Summer Institute at the University of Mississippi, which provides training and professional development to faculty about generative AI in education. Dr. Gerald Gerald, is an associate professor at the and a graduate advisor in the Division of Computer Science and Engineering at Louisiana State University. His academic background is in programming languages and compilers, but he's also involved in 2 interdisciplinary research projects that involve machine learning. And then our 7th panelist is Dr. Charreau Bell. She is a senior data scientist at the Data Science Institute at Vanderbilt University. She leads projects using machine learning and deep learning. She's also the faculty director of the undergraduate data science major. So I think you can tell from this lineup that we have a lot of experience in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth. The focus of today's panel discussion is going to be about generative AI. So I think we should start with a definition of generative AI and some examples that you might have come in contact with. So Dr. Bell, if I could start with you, what is generative AI? And can you give us some examples of generative AI that people can use today?
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. And just a preface, as my colleagues and students at Vanderbilt know, sometimes I get really overexcited about these topics, so I'll try to keep this concise. But I do know that our participants are from some diverse backgrounds. So I'd love to just start by painting a picture of the scope of artificial intelligence before we get to the generative part, to just disambiguate a little bit about the particular kind of AI that we're discussing. So traditionally, so the term AI encompasses a number of subdomains. So for example, there is traditional AI, which is going to involve logical chaining systems, knowledge representation. We're thinking more about traditional computer science approaches, trees and searches. These systems, some of these systems require a designer who writes a number of logical rules combined with this knowledge base, and then it puts together this logical chaining to come to some sort of answer. this isn't the AI that we're talking about. Other fields encompassed by the term AI include machine learning, and those are tools like statistical models, so think regression, support vector machines, clustering, decision trees, random forests, gradient boosted machines, those types of things. And then we have deep learning. And if you have heard of neural networks, this is what deep learning refers to, a particular size of these deep learning neural networks. So there are lots of different kinds of neural networks. There are lots of different kinds of architectures. And what I mean by architecture is how we arrange the underlying mathematical structures of these networks. One of these deep learning architectures is called the transformer. And the transformer is distinguished by its utilization of something called attention, which allows this rich representation of the sequence data. So what have we said? AI, it's grand scope. It has traditional AI, it has machine learning and deep learning, as well as some other fields of reinforcement learning. Okay, so thinking about deep learning, thinking about these transformers, the particular type of architecture of these deep learning neural networks, and it's applied to sequential data. So what's sequential data? This can be text, for example, sequences of words. It can also be images, videos, just data that is sequential. The question arises of how we train these models. So how do we do this? So we train these models by showing them large quantities of data, and then we allow them to compute the result for any individual example and across the set of examples. Then we compare what we know to be a target answer, and I'm using the word target answer and not correct answer, but the target answer, we compare this target answer against what the model generated and compute this difference between these quantities. And then we start nudging the model using this difference towards different representations over time and updating its model representations over time so that it comes closer and closer to regularly producing the target answer. And a trained model will do this until its designers have decided that it's performant. So now generative AI, again, we're in the domain deep learning and currently in transformers. Current implementations of generative AI are using a component of this deep learning transformer called the decoder. And this is specifically about text. What is special about this decoder? Well, let's come back to training of these models. So with a text model in particular, we might train a model to predict the next token. And for the purposes of this conversation, we'll say that a token is a word. So although that's usually not true, but when we have a lot of data, for example, a lot of text, a lot of books that are available to us, we might choose to train the model to predict the next word in any given sentence. And in providing this large quantity of training data and taking this approach for this deep learning transformer decoder, it becomes something that's called a large language model, although there are other ways to produce these large language models that we refer to as LLMs. So LLMs are exactly what they sound like, large language and models. It models the grammar, semantic relationships, conceptual relationships between words, sentences, concepts. So it's helping us to literally model the language. So now we have this deep learning transformer decoder, and it's doing a really great job of predicting the next token or the next word, depending on whatever you give it. So you run this recursively so that over and over, as you produce new words or new tokens to add to your input phrase, you get a sentence, you get a document. And so for your base models, like your early GPTs, this is what the training looks like. However, we did just say that these base LLMs are predicting the next token or the next word. And so what they'll try to do, as you may have experienced when using earlier versions of these models, is that they're going to try to complete the rest of the sentence, just beginning with whatever you started with. What you see now in the latest and most popular iterations of generative AI, particularly for text, they build upon this with additional sets of training steps. So what we've seen with the current phase of models like GPT-3, ChatGPT, GPT-4 from OpenAI, Bard, Bing GPT from Microsoft, Llama from Meta. What we've seen from them is this ability to follow instructions that are given to it and discern between different tasks that we require of it. So additionally, they're also trained to focus on the correct answer. So moving away from a target, we are using things like reinforcement learning from human feedback and safety safeguards as we're interacting with society to get towards a correct answer from a set of possibly correct answers or more desired answers. Again, I'm overly excited again, but just to wrap this up, when you're using these models, do keep in mind the time frame of data in which these models were trained. For example, some will only have information up to 2021. Some are not connected to the internet in the sense that they can leverage the internet to look up facts like GPT or ChatGPT. Others are connected to the internet and leverage it to look up facts. So things like Bing GPT, models are trained, are new plugins are being created for these models so they can leverage things like Wolfram Alpha, our symbolic mathematical engine, and other types of tools. So we really focus just then on text, but as we know, there are also generative AI models for images from companies like Midjourney. OpenAI has DALL-E and DALL-E 2. Also, we have things like Stable Diffusion from Stability AI. The architectures for some of these models are just utilizing some different approaches using deep learning for generating these images. So hope that helps to orient you towards what we're talking about with AI, what AI looks like, what these models are. Some of the models that we have available to us that perhaps we have enjoyed, but the main takeaway is to always remember that these models are not magic, but they are math. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. We had an interesting question that came up, and as I was preparing to be the moderator today, I asked ChatGPT some questions. One of the questions that came up is, who are the designers of this and how do they influence the correct answer? Now, the way that I asked it to ChatGPT this morning was, how do you differentiate between trustworthy and untrustworthy sources? And it gave a really interesting answer, which was more or less, use tools that you know about, use tools from verified sources. And it gets to this question, who are the designers and are they influencing the correct answers? Well, the designers in this case are OpenAI, and how are they leaning you towards correct answers? I think that's anybody's guess. What do you think, Dr. Bell?
So I think that's a really great question. Something that I really like about many of the companies that are currently producing these generative AI models, and also the ones in particular that are open source, is they write, of course, articles about their ethics or how they might choose to come up with their training set for the more correct or desired answer. And so in looking or choosing between a model to use, I would absolutely recommend going to these companies' websites, reading about their ethical policies and the choices that they make in terms of designing their data set for quote unquote correct answers. Also for your open source models, there are some companies that have these things called model cards, which are exceptional because they describe how the model is trained. They describe the data upon which the model was trained. They provide metrics, they provide code, they provide ethical considerations, environmental impact. And so if you choose to use an open source model, that's also an excellent way to understand some of the choices that are going into creating these models.
Excellent. You have to look under the hood. Good answer. Dr. Gong, I want to turn to you. Probably everyone here now has heard of ChatGPT. It exploded over the winter holidays in terms of popularity. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how students and faculty are currently using it?
Thank you. This is a great question. I especially want to talk about ChatGPT is that I think there's a long debate in AI research community is that, like Dr. Bell mentioned, that deep learning and neural networks. The question we are debating always is that how big we need to design the size of the neural networks. Previously, we don't have very strong belief that if we can design a very large, very huge size of neural networks, they will change much. They'll change very much because basically our theories, whatever computational theories or any other theories, and the knowledge will always limited in a certain dimension. But once OpenAI started this experiment to try to increase the size of neural networks, especially like the Dr. Bell mentioned that the next word prediction, this kind of transformer architecture based neural networks is already approaching pretty much a huge size, because we are talking about like GPT-3 is 175 billion. We talk about GPT-4 is pretty much 1 trillion, this size of neural networks. And once the neural networks, the size of neural networks approached this kind of size, we start to realize that in this kind of huge dimension of neural networks, it shows emergent abilities. It could do many things, reasoning. It could do reasoning, prediction, all kind of general intelligence coming up. So that's actually where I think all the AI researchers right now try to understand the behavior of this ChatGPT. I think every student and faculty also started using that, try to explore different application or different usage of this tool. But there are also some lots of researchers that try to understand the basic principle of it as well. At least right now we are guessing, that's pretty much all the discussion among the AI community is that we can assume that we can assume that if we describe this world, using language, using text, using image, using art, using music, using any other kind of art formats, we might just use the different language or different words or different format to describe the same thing, and that is common or generic structure of this description about our world or about ourselves. So this large size of neural networks inside the ChatGPT is able to model the inherent structure, whatever is pretty much common shared by all these format of the data. So that's the ChatGPT coming up, pretty much represent all these knowledge with a stream of probability functions right now. And based on that, they're able to do more amazing things or tasks right now, or general tasks right now. So that's pretty much, it's because the dimension of the neural network is pretty much beyond our understanding, our knowledge, our theories right now. So that's the reason it reveals something beyond the dimension of our traditional thinking as well. So like the students and also even me, my student and me, we're also using ChatGPT pretty much every day. We try to understand how we can better use it, how we can, especially like, I always talk to my students, say that generative is not equal to creative. It's generative tool, but it's not a creative tool. Especially for my student, I talk to them, say that we need to change our mindset. We cannot equally treat the generative as creative, because creative process is an iteration process. Even in writing, even just right now, we always talk about ChatGPT is very good at writing. But writing for students, or the writing training process, or even the writing for myself when I write something, it is an iterative process. The creativity is coming from iterative process of human mind, human thinking. It's all related to cognitive process. All is a dynamic process. It has to be improved in this way. But ChatGPT gave this kind of process and is very easily gave some misconception about creativity. So that's what I talk with my students, talk about all this, how we can use it, and what kind of conception we should have about generative and creative.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is really important to stress to our faculty, for instance, that I think students really are trying to push the boundaries of, say, ChatGPT right now and see what it can do and will do. But there are so many limitations, creativity being one of them, creativity in the writing, but also creativity in the way that the information is found or gathered. And ChatGPT alone will not mirror a complex mind in terms of the twists and turns that it would take either in the discovery of information or in the writing of a term paper. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Baumgartner, I wanted to ask you a question. Some school systems have outright bans on things like ChatGPT, which I think is a bit premature, but that's happened. It seems inevitable that people are going to try to use this tool in the workforce and in their daily lives probably quite soon. Do you think that we should be letting our students use it under certain conditions and help prepare them for what they're going to encounter in the workforce? Do you think that's something that we ought to be experimenting with?
Thank you for the question. Yes, definitely. I think we should be experimenting with this. So, as for comparison, when I started high school, using a pocket calculator was considered cheating. We were all supposed to use a slide rule. Now, there aren't a lot of slide rules around anymore, except in aviation training here in the U.S. People still use an E6B because it has specialized characteristics. But in education, I think we should be using the tools that are appropriate for the task at hand. When we are teaching multiplications in the third grade, we don't want students to use a pocket calculator. We want them to learn how multiplications work, but once it gets a little bit more complex, by all means, slide rules are a little bit too out of date. And similarly with ChatGPT, if you're trying to teach something, say something low level that ChatGPT might be able to do, but you want the students to get the skills for doing it themselves, you probably want to limit or prohibit the use of ChatGPT. But for building on top of that, for doing more complex tasks, I think it's a great tool, and we just need to learn how to use it effectively. So a lot of people have been experimenting with it. It's been the fastest adoption of any internet tool from what I've heard. But we still don't have the teaching material, the experience with what works, what doesn't work. So that will need some experimenting for which purposes, for which types of problems is it appropriate, and for which types of problems is it not appropriate. Personally, I'm teaching in the fields of programming languages and compilers. And if students want to cheat, it's much easier to cheat with regular internet searches. ChatGPT isn't going to help them much. For the tools I have built, or for the text I have written, whenever I tried to use ChatGPT, it wasn't great. It didn't really produce very good answers, but it's useful for a first very rough draft. When I ask my students, they say the same thing, that they don't really trust it very much. An interesting response I got from one student when he doesn't understand a topic in class all that well. He asks ChatGPT to explain it like he's a 9-year-old, and that seems to help. So for education, as faculty, we need to figure out for what problems can ChatGPT be helpful, and how we are going to incorporate that in assignments, and for what problems do we want to limit it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're at a point where giving assignments to our students to use generative AI, letting them experience where it succeeds and where it fails, and also probably letting them know that they're not allowed to use it on a midterm or a final or whatever is right for your particular class, will give them that experience of using it and seeing for themselves what the potential limitations are. I really like that approach. Thank you. Marc, you're in the Department of Writing and Rhetoric, which I'm sure you've had a really interesting perspective, if not some fear, around ChatGPT and other generative AI, but your faculty have actually studied and looked at how students are using AI in the class. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned in that?
Yeah, thank you, David. We started way back in May of 2020 when we were kind of aware of a program called Jasper, which was using an earlier API call from GPT-3. We came together as a group during that summer of 2020, about 8 of us, because we wanted to really explore what this was going to do with the student writing process. This was about 6-7 months before ChatGPT burst on the scene. We thought we had a lot of time to sort of roll through this and get some quality feedback about how our students are using it. We had no idea that what was to come, but we did sit down and start creating some parameters about how students could use this effectively in first-year writing courses and also upper division writing classes. We've collected so far in the last 2 semesters about 85,000 words of student reflection, students using different types of AI assistants in their actual essays, their research. And our IRB approved research question is very, very broad, because we just wanted to basically see is, what does generative AI do to the student learning process? And what we've done is look for specific AI tools that sort of slow down the generative process to give students time to reflect on what this does to their learning. So we looked at specific AI assistants. Some of those assistants we've been using too that we like. One is called WordTune from AI21 Studios. It's a company out of Israel that uses the Jurassic large language model engine. It's set up a lot like a Google Doc, where students write normally in an organic process, and they just call upon AI assistants when they get stuck at a pain point in writing. Another reading assistant, because you can actually use this to actually augment reading, that we've used for students too, is called SciSpace, where you can upload a PDF that may be beyond a student's reading level, or a student may have a recognized learning disability, or they may be a second language learner and need some assistance that way too. You can call upon AI to actually help read and chat with the actual PDF. And then another version of AI assistants we've been using is research. We've used Elicit's AI, which embeds the language model directly into the database, where students can then go through and search through open access research journals using AI. And what we started off with was designing very specific assignments for those students to use generative AI when they actually reach a pain point in the writing process. In the fall, we looked at specifically counter arguments and how students develop research questions. And what we found is that students really like calling upon AI assistants in that very sort of structured manner. Now, what's fascinating to me is, since we've kept this going on in the spring too, we are also using now ChatGPT, and students have the ability to use it in our classes. All we're asking them to do is to identify when they're using it and reflect upon its use, is that we were seeing very low engagement of it outside of the assignments we design. And I'm teaching 60 students right now. And I asked them this week, because I was preparing for the panel, I said, what can I tell people who'd be interested about this, about why you're not using ChatGPT in your writing? And it got some really fascinating answers from students too. Many of them reported that they didn't want to be known as the AI kid in class. But I said, what on earth do you mean, the AI kid in class? And I got several different responses. Students are afraid that if they use generative AI, they're going to be accused as cheating from their actual teachers, or they're going to be seen as trying to get around the process of learning from their teachers too. They're also afraid that their peers are going to think that they're stupid or incompetent if they call upon AI assistants in the classroom. So that's one of the fears that they have. Another fear, since this technology does hallucinate facts and make up sources, is that a lot of students express an incredible amount of anxiety to go through and try to fact check an actual generation. One student said it's just too anxious for him to actually go through this and begin to fact check something, especially if he didn't have the skills necessary or the content knowledge for the actual paper to do so. So there's a lot of different ways that students are looking at generative AI too. However, all of them, all 60 students, absolutely realize and recognize that they will need to call upon AI assistants in some way, shape, or form, probably in their job and career path. But that sort of thinking isn't necessarily being, I'm searching for the words here too. Since there's not a clear use case in their actual job fields yet, they don't know exactly what skills they're going to need that are for AI assistance. So what we're trying to do now, the University of Mississippi, is to try to basically teach our students and our faculty basic AI literacy about the technology, about the different types of use cases. And we have started a summer institute to train teachers of writing with the technology. They're not just teachers in my department from the writing rhetoric, but also from law, from any type of discipline that is writing specific. And we hope to increase that to other disciplines that use other forms of generative AI too. If you are concerned about your students using the technology to cheat, I will say that from our own examples that we've seen in our department too, is that most students are very reluctant to do this. Where I do think it's going to have some issues with academic honesty and integrity is the actual sort of paper mills and contract cheating. If they start becoming early adopters of the technology, that's going to make the process of buying a term paper from someone who actually knows how to write, first of all, using the technology cheaper and much more accessible. So that's something we're going to have to think about too. And really what we're kind of focusing on now is next steps, because Microsoft is moving ahead to demo this in Microsoft Office. I believe they're calling it Copilot, and it is right now in the testing phase. I think from their marketing material, they will be releasing this in the summer or the fall. So I would encourage all universities, all departments to have a plan in place of how you're at least going to introduce generative AI to your students and your faculty, and also have some resources available to them, whether that's through Centers for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, a writing center, or an academic innovations group on campus, just so you can have support there for your faculty too. And we're very happy to share resources that we're developing here as well and approaches. Before I turn this back to David, the one thing I will say this is, if you really want to engage your students about generative AI and talk to them about it, and really kind of focus on the fact that this is going to be designed to augment their learning, not replace it, ask them this one question. If you are going, as a student, going to be using generative AI to write your essays, what keeps me as a faculty member from using generative AI to grade your essay? And where does learning occur in that process? You're going to have some big eye-opening experiences from those types of questions you get for your students too. And if you do implement guardrails for your students too, they are, for the most part, going to be very respectful of that. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that question. That's really thought-provoking. So, Marc, you covered an incredible amount of wonderful material. I know that our attendees really appreciate that. But two things really stuck out to me. And one is the anxiety that our students deal with and how generative AI can either help with that or in fact, create new challenges for them. And then related to that, of course, is the skill set that they already have. When we think about young students and their ability to do research, for them, it means doing Google searches, right? I mean, lost are the days when we go to a library or even find our students doing, quality searches of literature that's been done in the past. And so they don't have those skills, not because of generative AI, but because of other things that have broken down along the way sometimes. And then when you think about anxiety, it could be the anxiety that a student faces with a blank page in front of them and not knowing where to start. And of course, generative AI can help them start. Or it could be the anxiety that you mentioned, which is, how am I going to fact check this? I don't even understand where the data is coming from necessarily. It gets to a question that was asked in the Q&A about sources and how you can get sources of information from ChatGPT, and the difficulty in doing so sometimes, especially when you're just asking it to write a first draft of a paper. But there really is so much to unpack. I think our panel discussion really is only scratching the surface of the conversations that have to happen. One of the things that we've talked about doing later in the summer, or even extending into the fall, is having breakout sessions among our SEC universities to talk about either discipline-specific questions or just questions that might need a deeper dive. And I hope that panelists will look out for advertisements. If we do that, we could dive into how could this be used to help students who have certain challenges, or how do we start to dive into source checking and other things that people are really concerned about. Thanks for all the information you shared, Marc. I really appreciate it. Dr. Ali, how's Auburn University approaching working with faculty when it comes to teaching with AI? I know you have a lot going on there.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Reed, for that question. We've got quite an array of resources and services available. So Dr. Dozier and Dr. Narayanan in our computer science and software engineering department, I want to give them a nod, because they lead they've got tremendous programming around the research of AI and that overall initiative and approach. In the Biggio Center, our focus has been on what is the impact of AI in teaching and learning, and so we're looking at it from three approaches. The three things that we're looking at is, how do we provide resources to raise the baseline AI knowledge across campus? How do we provide programming that challenges us to think about AI from different perspectives? And then how do we follow up with resources for faculty that want to experiment with AI in their teaching? So I want to focus on that first part about raising the baseline knowledge of just around artificial intelligence on campus. What we've done is we benefit from a unique organizational structure at Auburn, in that all of the instructional support and innovation that central services are located under the Biggio Center umbrella in our Provost office. And so we enjoy tremendous support from our central administration, and Auburn Online, which develops these online courses and online programs that we talk about, reaching the professional audience of out there, people who are busy working and busy with their families, but they also want to learn new things. Well, in this scenario, the faculty and professional staff on campuses like ours, we are that audience, we are that demographic. And so what we've been able to do is our colleagues in the Biggio Center have been able to, we've developed a course that's fully online, self-paced, self-directed, resides in our Canvas instance. So faculty are logging in anyway and accessing their courses, and they see this course available to them if they sign up there. And what this course is able to do is help us provide the material that's needed for faculty to better understand AI in the teaching and learning context. Dr. Bell introduced AI and generative AI just earlier in our session. And what we want is, how do we bring that content in the context of teaching and learning to a larger audience on their own time and at their own pace? So that's one of the modules. We've got about 8 modules in this course. We cover things like ethics and legal concerns, how they can partner with their students. We've done a survey of students led by one of our associate directors in the Biggio Center, looking at how students are already using a lot of these tools. What are the common tools that they're already using? And then providing the tools to our faculty and professional staff on how they can engage with students in that context to be able to have a shared conversation about how to improve their learning as a result of using these tools, instead of feeling like that they have to hide and use these in some kind of feel guilty about using them because their faculty may not want them to use them. We also look at considerations of how to redesign courses or redesign assignments, just in the reality of understanding that AI plays a role that's available to impact certainly academic integrity concerns, but also how do we, if we look at the SAMR model that's offered by by Robin Pentadora, about how do we elevate into the redesigning tasks to be just completely different In my class, for example, I used to do an essay assignment for all of our business students that took my class around emerging technologies in their field. Instead of having them write an essay, I have them actually engage with ChatGPT, and then they look into the implications of this new tool that they've now been exposed to. And I have them do a podcast instead. They work in groups of 4 and they have conversational style podcasts that they submit around what they see as the implication of these kinds of tools impacting their profession, their careers, and helps them articulate this idea a lot more in terms of how it's going to impact them. And so that's one example of taking a different approach. So we've done a soft launch of this course. We've got about 5% of the faculty already signed up. We're going to take a full launch in the next couple of weeks. And then the course also serves a dual purpose because it's designed by our incredible instructional designers in Auburn Online. So the faculty are also engaging with what we would consider an exemplary online course, but also just an exemplary course that's designed for them to go through. So what we do is we encourage faculty to explore the topics that are covered in artificial intelligence. We encourage them to play with the tools that we've made available. And then we're always constantly adding, as you know, there's new tools becoming available all the time. And then there's activities to help them articulate their thoughts in terms of how it's going to have an impact on their practice. And we hope that this type of an approach, first of all, it reduces the anxiety. We talk about student anxiety a lot, but there's also, faculty also, as things are always, the pace of change is increasing, but also the rate of change is increasing. That creates anxiety for a lot of professionals as well. And so how do we help them kind of lower that hurdle and those barriers that they may feel in terms of just better understanding AI in the teaching and learning context? So those are some of the things that we're doing. We've hosted some speakers that talk about reframing the understanding of AI in the academic integrity context. And it was great to have colleagues from around the Southeastern Conference participate in that. I'm looking forward to Dr. McDonald and the SEC has put together the shared calendar of resources and events available to faculty across the Southeastern Conference. I'm hoping that just this collaborative approach that we've taken in the Southeastern Conference really serves as an example to make just taps in the expertise that exists across our institutions to be able to make that information available more broadly.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Ali. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. I think as we think about small steps that we can take as faculty, individual faculty, thinking about our own courses and what we might do over the summer, literally just sitting down and playing with ChatGPT or some other generative AI is going to teach you a lot about it. And luckily, the learning curve is quite simple. So this morning, I asked it to interpret lyrics of old 1980s songs, and it was hilarious. I mean, it actually did a good job, but it seems like all that artists were focusing on in pop songs during that time was raging against society and the machine and government and so forth. Or maybe that was the songs that I happened to choose. But just sitting down and figuring out, what kinds of things you can do with this is going to be really helpful. So as we think about redesigning an assignment like you talked about, I really like the idea of putting the onus on your students to do something with a generative AI tool and then discussing it themselves for the grade, whether it's a podcast like you mentioned or whatever. Put them on the spot to try to jump under the hood as much as they possibly can, or at least explore its boundaries. And they themselves will recognize what's useful about it and what its limitations are. I really like that.
Yeah, certainly trying to discourage a dismissive approach. You can engage with AI today and say, well, it doesn't really do the things that I'm doing. But the rate of change is so quick that, it's just a matter of time before it does have an impact on, I think, every field.
Yeah, a faculty member of mine really had an aha moment as we were sitting around a table. And I didn't say this to them, and this was months ago, but they said, so you're telling me that Microsoft Word is going to have a built-in AI where I can tell it, I have 150 documents on my hard drive in my voice writing about a particular technical topic. I can ask it to make the first draft. And I said, yeah, it's probably going to do exactly that for you. And of course, Microsoft Word is working on this in Copilot, and it's meant to do virtually that very thing. So it is going to change. You'd be putting your head in the sand to say this isn't going to change the way people do work. It really
Marc asked a compelling question. Well, what's the end game, right? If all of our students are submitting AI stuff and we're using AI to grade, So my like kind of comical answer to that is yes, students will submit all their AI stuff. Our faculty will grade all with using AI, and with the time that we save, all of us will go for a walk in the park where all the real learning will actually take place.
I love that. Yeah, as a biologist, that appeals to me. So, we also talked about how much we've learned from each other, the different universities here, and that has been incredibly helpful. We've done that for quite some time. And I think it's one of the best things about getting this group together. Dr. Ali, Auburn University has been working with faculty. I'm sorry, I just totally blanked on where we were going. I apologize. I believe we are at, let's see, we're at Dr. Shyu, sorry. Boy, did my mind just go crazy. So Mizzou has also been doing this. So they've had a workshop just recently for faculty, similar to Auburn's work and others, trying to address generative AI. What were some of the take-home message when your faculty got together to talk about this?
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah. I think Mizzou had a generative AI workshop on April the 7th. That's last Friday. And we have about 60 faculty members from 10 schools and colleges, as well as our colleagues from St. Louis, from Washington University at St. Louis. It is about 5 hours long workshop. And we started with Provost Ramchan kick off the meeting and to talk about concerns and also opportunities in higher education by using generative AI tools. And we have a computer science faculty provided a 30,000-foot view of what's under the hood of recent generative AI tools. Dr. Bell, I think you are doing a wonderful job. We need to learn from you more about that. And and also the landscape of startups developing, generating AI products. And we have 5 groups then discuss topics related to opportunities in education, opportunities in research, and concerns in ethics bias and legal implication, and also a very unique group to talk about creative arts and how generative AI will help them or would bring them to a different direction of creative art. And then we have an hour-long panel to discuss academic integrity led by our director for academic integrity office from the provost office, and also our writing center, learning for teaching type of the center directors. And then the outcome of the workshop will provide the university initial strategy and recommendations to embrace the technology. So overall, while there are concerns about academic integrity and issues about ethics, legal, and faculty actually are more positive than what we expected toward embracing the technology here. So there are some samples, for take-home message from each group here. Education. And education group is the largest group in our whole discussion in the room here. Generative AI can really help, and they love to see content preparation, with human checking, of course, and literature reviews and draft writing to utilize the AI tools for education. And there are a couple of topics I think very interesting to share with our SEC groups here. Special education. Faculty brought up how to tailor personal needs by integrating generative AI with personal needs at different levels of learning disability, how we use that for special education. For medical education, Mizzou is a pioneer or an early adapter of problem-based learning, so-called PBL for medical education. So with proper supervision of attending physicians, generative AI could be used to enhance the PBL learning for our medical students. Of course, citations, of course, the source quality of the source of knowledges, they are very important for us to look at how we use generative AI to help problem-based learning. And journalism training, right, to write news articles, and how we train students to utilize this type of the AI tools to write articles. And an interesting concept about prompt engineering. Like I think like from the questions from the audience about how to write prompts, right? So that could be a new area of like, training called prompt engineering, how we develop prompts. They are efficient, they could be efficiently used that generative AI to answer questions for us in a more precise way. And then the final topic is like, student-teacher collaboration. I think that's very important to have role exchange. So as a teacher, if I use generative AI to teach programming language, for example, I teach database. So for SQL structured query language, then I would like to switch my role with the students, and students like, will look at that because generative AI, ChatGPT can really write precise codes. For even natural language, like query, I put it in, they can come up with really precise codes for that. So how we utilize that and how we exchange the role of students and teachers, so we have this kind of cooperation to better instruct and better learn from the students. For the research group, there are two areas of research. One is fundamental research of using generative AI, large language model idea, and how we use that to enhance the reasoning, causality, and explainability, and how we use that to really advance the AI. So the black boxes for neural network, deep learning may not be there yet, but how we are going to push that for fundamental AI research. So this group is more computer science, more engineering folks. Another group to utilize generative AI to use the API type to really bring their lab data, their collection of data to have dedicated answers from public knowledge. And this has been there already to use the API to integrate with generative AI tools. So group of the faculty would like to see opportunities, how they use this type of the tools to help them to advance their research that cannot be done without this type of the tool. And then the third group, ethics and bias. I think a couple of topics very interesting, inspiring. One is equity of tool access, because there are hundreds, could be thousands of the generative AI tools there. And then the quality, the equity of tool access. Some you need subscription, some have high quality, and some have inaccurate information. So equity of tool access becomes important topic. And faculty also recommend an IRB standing board for a board to really look at AI tools used in education and also research. And also bring ethical and bias awareness to teaching and research when using AI technology. And then the final group is creative arts. We have faculty from different areas: digital storytelling, visual arts, AI and human collaboration, music composition, and also AI for future of fashion industry, textile and apparel. Yeah. So they brought up artwork is a unique artist lens of the world. In that sense, AI technology presents a fascinating question of authenticity about our creative arts. But they also bring up more collaborations, how to use AI tools with the artist, and also AI researchers with the artist. So from our experience for this workshop, faculty recommend to have service core for AI, just like other service cores you can see for DNA service core or some other service core, and how we chase the new tools, understand the new tools, and bring those concepts, those daily evolving concepts to our faculty and students for the latest technology. And an important recommendation is more AI faculty. So luckily, Mizzou has so-called Mizzou 4 program is hiring AI faculty. So that's pretty much our workshop and also recommendation to our university.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. Man, there's a lot of wonderful recommendations. I love the way that you broke them out into the different disciplines to talk about what might be important to one discipline and something specific or wholly different in another discipline. I think that really speaks to breakout sessions or independent sessions that we might do across the SEC, where we focus on the arts, for instance, and the unique concerns that they may have around generative AI, as well as many other disciplines. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you.
So now I'm going to turn to Dr. Parisi. So many of the faculty are concerned about students cheating, and this is obviously a valid concern. Should that be an entirely separate discussion about academic integrity? Should we use GPT as a teaching moment to talk about academic integrity?
So that's a terrific question. Thanks, Dr. Reed. I don't think we should separate the two conversations, which probably we should expand the conversations to be much broader at the institutional level. It's very interesting to see each panelist presenting their own point of view. But at the end of the day, everything boils down to what does it really mean for us as an institution to redefine integrity. Probably this is the first time the institutional higher learning and being in this position of rethinking the way we want it to be redefined. So I think there are several things that I've learned over the last 10, 15 years when it comes to these things. One, these things don't happen in a vacuum. So we need to think about the context in which all this, digital transformations are happening. And so there's a reason why we call it now the era of digital transformation. They're talking about moving toward education 4.0. And so how institutional learning responded to this broader change is very important. And so this brings really to the point that we're trying to address today, that those technologies, this generative AI, cannot be seen as simple tools. In fact, every single panelist pointed out that those are more resources. And as resources, what that points out is, are we actually, ready to use those resources in open, honest, and responsible way when we think about scholarly activities. And so there were several examples that are being presented today. For instance, integrity within the classroom. When would be appropriate for students to use ChatGPT or any AI, generative AI for address a specific problem? But I was having several conversations with several colleagues around the country, and one thing that I learned about, integrity within the classroom is the students actually have this burning desire also to learn more and beyond what they learn within the classroom. And so there are students that go and use this to say, okay, what are the alternative explanations? What are the alternative models? This was happening, for instance, in one of my colleague stat class. She was teaching the class and the students came back and basically wanted to go a little bit deeper. So it can really help students and help us to really put students in the position to go beyond what they can learn just into the classroom. The other thing is that faculty, and I'll get back to the idea of integrity, again, academic integrity, it doesn't have to be just cheating. Everybody talked about as a tool to assist in what we do. The other thing that it's very interesting is to how this is going to impact faculty. This was something that a colleague of mine basically brought it up to me and say, hey, I'm more than open to use and experiment, but the amount of resources and time that I have to dedicate it to change the way I teach, if I have to use ChatGPT in my class, which he does, is also putting a kind of a strain on my teaching load. And I have to basically sacrifice some of the time I use for other activity that I have to do to actually do the teaching I need to do. So this might also mean to reconsider how faculty, are, assigned their teaching load. If this kind of technology is going to help to assist faculty and helping student a new way of learning, then, we need to kind of think about, how this can really impact our faculty teaching load. But the issue of integrity is also, at the end, as I say, my experience is that it comes down to a point where how do we redefine this notion of academic integrity in terms of engaging in scholarly activities that are open, honest, and responsible when we use ChatGPT. I think that's the biggest challenge that we have in front of us. And so how do we engage in creating new programs? So for instance, Mississippi State, we decided to create a data science literacy that would allow students that are really interested in learning this to go take the class and learn really about the strengths and the weaknesses of these tools, which is, I think, is the biggest challenge in all this. What are the limitations of these tools? They can help, but at the same time, what are the threats that will undermine our academic integrity? The other thing is to have a much broader conversation in terms of that we've been able to identify, for instance, on campus, we have experts and users. So I heard today, there are people that push the boundary with this technology, but also people that actually use those technology. So how do we assist this to kind of type of faculty or staff? And the last is, how do we engage in this conversation? So Mississippi State, again, those are not solutions, but at least we try to redefine ourselves in our own way. And so we have a campus-wide committee with representatives from each college, and the conversation started with them. We're going to have a campus-wide forum, and then where every department heads, every academic units will be engaging in this conversation, because, as we said, it impacts everyone in different ways. So I think yes, and I will end by basically saying yes. The biggest challenge in front of us with this new technology is not, again, whether or not this technology is going to help us in doing what we do, is how we redefine academic integrity in terms of scholarly activities that will be impacted heavily by this new technology. So I'll end here. I know that we are kind of running out of time, so I'm sure there will be other questions. And so thanks really for inviting me on this panel. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Parisi. It's great to have you here. So if I'm going to ask a few general questions, we have some really good ones in the Q&A as well. If I could have all the panelists, if they're welcome to do so, turn on their cameras and unmute themselves. I'd like to have a real panel discussion. I think there's 7 of you, so we should be able to manage this quite easily. I want to start with a question that gets a little bit into the weeds, and that relates to some of the concerns that we have around generative AI, because there are some concerns. For instance, intellectual property and/or copyright infringement. These are critically important, not only to our friends in the art world, but also in other areas as well. I would just wonder if anyone would comment on copyright infringement, as well as intellectual property, and how these are being addressed or how they're not. And I'll just leave the floor open to discuss those topics for a moment.
I used personally ChatGPT for preventing copyright infringement. So I needed to write a paper on some new results, but in the first draft I had copied a lot of the introductory material and the reference material from a previous paper, and the publisher of the new paper insisted on using Authenticate. So in order to just make the text different so that the two publishers don't have competing copyright claims here, I just took one paragraph at a time, cut and pasted it into ChatGPT, asked ChatGPT to rewrite it. Now, most of what I got back from ChatGPT was complete garbage. It used terminology that was not appropriate for a scientific paper. It used phrases that were either informal or not in my voice. But the benefit was it gave me different kinds of sentence structure. So then between my original first draft and then what I got out of ChatGPT, that helped me in rewriting the text. So I find it useful for a very rough first or maybe second draft that then you build on top of. For other aspects of intellectual property right, ChatGPT is trained on all kinds of text that it found on the internet. And so I don't know what what copyrighted text it is trained on, and what the copyright holders of that text would have to say about it. Similar to ChatGPT with Microsoft's Copilot, they are trying to build a tool to help in software development that's based on all the code that's in GitHub. Personally, I don't feel comfortable in contributing open source software to GitHub only for an AI tool than to mine my code and use that in commercial software. So there's actually a lawsuit pending against Microsoft that it should not be doing this, that should be honoring the open source licenses. So there are all kinds of issues where you might be able to use ChatGPT for positive results, or where ChatGPT or other AI tools might actually be infringing, where it might end up being sorted out in the courts.
Others want to chime in? So one of the issues that our digital artists have asked us to look into, and it's in the weeds for sure, but it gets your mind thinking about broader issues, is if they're collaborating with another artist and the artist gives them some material that they can then riff off of, whether it's visual art or music or whatever, and you do that through a generative AI, how do you deal with the intellectual property changes as it goes through that? And more specifically, data protection. Maybe you're borrowing something from someone that you're eventually going to give back. So just thinking of the provenance of the data that you've taken in, but it gets thorny really, really quickly as we think about data usage and how we're tracking the data itself and how we are given attribution to the work when it can come from multiple people, including a generative AI. So I think these issues, we're so far in the infancy, it'll be a challenge over the next years to work out. Someone asked me at a talk yesterday, where's the federal government in terms of regulation and policy and so forth on this? And my answer was, they're a decade behind, right? We're barely dealing with the internet very well in terms of regulation and other things. And so we can't expect the solutions to come from there in the near term, I think.
Yeah, David, that's a really good point on this, is that I think when it comes to these copyright and plagiarism kinds of concerns, they predate AI. I think we need to differentiate that there needs to be, more thoughtful solutions and thoughtful, I guess, not just regulation. I think that's more of a chasing game as well. But, can we somehow participate and incentivize the private industry to create the solutions that we need from the teaching and learning angle, not just from the, like I think about contract cheating, for example, students hiring someone to write their essays, those kinds of things that are nearly impossible to detect. Those things have been happening since before AI. So we really need some kind of a more thoughtful solution for addressing those fundamental issues that already exist in terms of how technology is being used in teaching and learning. But I think it is worth acknowledging that what AI does is it makes it more broadly available, and the pace of it is what's really troubling. I think it's just how quickly and, broadly, I played in the high school band, but I'm not a musician. But because of AI tools, I'm now also able to have some kind of competency in terms of creating music. And I think that's the challenging part, is that it's just more broadly available. I think that conversation is more challenging. How do we address the concerns? Because we don't want to stifle creativity either.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so an interesting question from the chat is, this was Rachel Fiore's question. I'm wondering how quickly we believe this technology will be evolving. Will this be an entirely different conversation a year from now, 6 months, and 5 months? Anyone want to weigh in on that?
I will only say this: the question is a great question, but the question is, how fast can we be ready? What is the institutional capacity to really absorb this massive amount of technologies that have been thrown at us. So I think that's a threat in terms of not the technology itself, is that are we ready? Are we thinking about, as institutions, creating the right infrastructure, resources that is going to allow our faculty to really be able to do in a very ethical way the work that we're doing. But otherwise, the anxiety for us is going to be really it's going to go to the roof. So yeah, it's a great question, and definitely is going to keep growing. Like, think about what happened with ChatGPT in a matter of a year. It went from small things to be a big things. I expect this to grow even faster. So for me, the question is more like, what is our institutional capacity? Can we really absorb this change that is happening outside the walls of higher education?
Yeah. Anyone else?
I want to talk about this is that the generative AI definitely will evolve very fast. Our discussion in next year definitely will be different, because not only the evolving of the generator, it's also the evolving of our usage of this AI. Because I also saw there is another comment from the chat, is that like auto GPT right now is AI is calling another other AI system to create something new. So that's kind of evolving very fast right now. Some drawbacks or some limitations of generative AI today we talk about, they might be resolved very soon. For example, I saw lots of questions about because the ChatGPT always make up the references. All these references, they are fake. So I think this issue will be resolved as well. So I believe so our discussion will be different very soon. But another thing I want to mention is that another trend is that I believe so every business or industry or company or even universities will start building their local ChatGPT or local generative AI for data collection and the data privacy. It means that for the local generative AI, it will help us to protect the data privacy, all other copyright issues or intellectual property. I think that's another trend I will see in the future as well. We will also discuss this again very soon. So that's my comments on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I also wanted to add that I think we will always generally be having a same general sort of conversation around AI and its development. So it will, I agree that it will develop extremely quickly. It's just that we'll always be asking, all right, how are we going to fold this into our work? Should we fold this into our work? How can we use this to improve the learning of students? If they have this particular tool, what do we need to teach on top of that to provide them the value now that this tool is available? So I think that sort of conversation will always be the same, but I also agree that the technology is moving incredibly rapidly.
And I think Dr. Parisi made a good point about, are we ready? I think just equally, if not more of an impact for our institutions is maybe not even in the teaching and learning context, but it's in, who and how we work with in terms of the business processes. If we think about AI's capability in terms of pattern detection and being able to train those models, a lot of our universities, particularly in the Southeastern Conference, are either in or near small towns where we hire a lot of our office staff from. And, think about the folks that you turn in your receipts to. They're doing pattern detection essentially to ensure that there's no fraud or illegal spending according to the rules and things like that. And, we've incentivized our departments and colleges to do a lot of cost cutting. And I'm not sure if we're ready for the kind of economic impact it would create and the disproportionate economic impact it'll create on the lowest end of our economic, spectrum in the towns and cities that we are located in, when those folks either need to train up into completely different jobs, or quite frankly, we don't need to hire as many of them to be able to achieve same or faster results in terms of our business processes at our institutions.
And if I would like to look at the crystal ball, right, about what ChatGPT, generative AI, I think accuracy will be improved, will be greatly improved, over time. But they still have limitations, still based on deep learning networks, still limitations about reasoning, still limitation about explainability. So we'll see function-wide and also tools will be built surrounding this technology here, but it won't be forever, right? We will need some breakthrough about AI to move us to the next level.
Yeah, agreed. So as we think about our faculty who are listening and they're thinking about what they might do to incorporate generative AI in the course that they are preparing to teach in the fall, we had a really good question. It says, can you please share some specific ideas or options for written assignments? The podcast is a good idea, but they're interested in hearing more. So at the risk of us all talking over one another, let's just give a bunch of different examples. I don't care if we're talking over one another, but some assignments that we can do. And there was another question in here too, with the caution that if people are using the same prompts, they might get very similar answers. And so with that in mind, let's give our listeners some examples of things that they can do in courses in the fall to help get our students started with generative AI.
Well, that's a really great question. That's something that we're thinking about now too, just how to actually introduce generative AI as a concept to students as well as what we've been trying to work on too. You may not want to start with writing. You want to start with something visual. I think Google has what's called Quick Draw, which is a type of machine learning that you can actually kind of show students about that how machine learning actually is reactive to the prompt. Because prompting is a very difficult task for this to actually function with it. And some of the earlier things I shared in the Q&A are existing systems that are writing assistants that can have generative AI built into it. So if you want to build a specific assignment for students to actually call upon, either using ChatGPT or GPT-4, you might want to start slowly and find an actual version of those assistants that kind of slows down that process. Because ChatGPT is very overwhelming for people when they go to it too. It doesn't matter if it's a first-year writing student or upper division student. It takes a little bit of work to actually go through the prompt. I know ChatGPT provides almost a frictionless experience for users, but you still have to have some good content knowledge, some rhetorical knowledge to actually use it. So trying to find those types of small experiences too. And I am going to try to share an assignment here with Q&A if I can find it on my incredibly disorganized computer, but I will definitely try to drop that in the Q&A.
Others?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of thoughts on this. One is, it's not just writing assignments, but writing assignments are an important part of it. One of the key advice that I've seen and that I also share with our faculty is to, rather than focusing on the product, which is currently what we do, right? We say, turn in your assignment, turn in your essay, turn in your whatever it may be, and that's what's graded. Really take a shift back and look at the process. And let's see, is there a way to grade the process or the progress that the student's making towards that output, and maybe scaffolding the assignment a little bit differently from that approach. The second thing is also kind of taking a first principles approach at it. Instead of just saying, you don't teach your class because generally, you're not teaching your class so the students learn, writing that specific assignment. So think back to what is it that you're actually hoping for the students to learn? What is your learning objective? What are you hoping for the students to get out of it? And then can you build, that same process and progress around that particular learning objective? And then think around, what is the best way for the students to demonstrate that learning? If it still continues to be a writing assignment, then I would certainly suggest looking at that progress over time. And then, most of your campuses, certainly at Auburn, we've got a talented team in terms of our Office of University Writing. We've got instructional designers. Engage those professionals. That's what they're there for. They're here, their expertise is in how folks learn. They're staying, on top of these types of issues in terms of not just AI, but some of the other technological implications in terms of what students are able to do, past detection and things like that. And so, engage with those professionals on your campuses to help you think about your teaching specifically. And I think that's gonna elevate your teaching far better. And then it'll also ideally and most likely elevate the learning far better than anything that we can discuss in a webinar.
So in our data science class, the Wrangling class, to go back to one of the points that was made earlier, identify a problem and say, okay, and so like coding, you do your own coding, but then, use ChatGPT and say, okay, I'm kind of an impasse. I can't figure out the problem. just be inquisitive and see how that can help you to assist you. So that work. So don't use for everything, but as I say, experiment a little bit, teach the students, how this can be used in a most appropriate way. The other thing that we have done, just to introduce the idea of this technology in terms of asking the right question, we tell our students, if you ask the wrong question, you can expect to have the right answer. So how do you become inquisitive and how you become more, proficient in the way you prompt this? So being able to prompt, and so we start with the wrong answer, but we show that it wasn't wrong because the ChatGPT gave me the wrong answer, because the prompt was actually, not done properly, and then ultimately you get to the right answer. So show them that the tool can work, and I think they will learn basically to use it in the most appropriate way.
And what I learned from our faculty is to provide up-to-date information in the assignment, right? Mm-hmm. So ChatGPT is not going to train data from yesterday. They are not ready for that, and tailor to special cases we instruct in the class. So in this case here, the students have to look at the answer carefully and also work with the project.
Actually, our experiences makes the professor more relevant in the classroom, because what you just said, the professor is what knows, creates the knowledge, and is most apt to date, and so it gives a different dynamic even to the instructor. Yeah.
I also wanted to talk about something that my colleague at Vanderbilt said, Dr. Jiaqi Crystal, and what she said was that we have to know more about the topic that we're asking ChatGPT about, or any generative AI about, so we can know where it falls short. And so I think that at the current state where these models aren't as accurate as they could be, I think that is a nice thing to leverage. So let's say that you might give ChatGPT a prompt, or your instructor or the instructor might give ChatGPT a prompt, and you come out with an essay. Maybe the assignment is to critique the essay on whatever aspects that are necessary in your course, or maybe you ask them to rewrite it or find the areas of it that are incorrect. And so in that, you still learn what the goals are, but you're still also able to leverage the ChatGPT approaches. I think that could certainly be something interesting.
It's interesting. I think it was on NPR a few weeks ago, talking about talking about prompt engineers and the importance of designing prompts well and correctly for a particular generative AI, whatever that is. And the question wasn't asked this way, but a question came up. It's, how will generative AI affect engineering education? And it's a really, compelling question, right? There's many kinds of engineers, right? But if we think about computer science and the engineers that are, working on providing answers for a business, applied engineering in many different contexts, I wonder how AI will affect their training at our university, say 2, 3, 4 years down the road. It's interesting to think about.
I can share a little bit about engineering, right? Because I'm engineering background here. During our workshop, our civil engineering chair was there. And then he shared for civil engineering, there are so many different computing tools to come up with answers. ChatGPT cannot do that now. Perhaps in the future for that, right? Mm-hmm. And if there are tools, you can use open source Python, those codes to do that. Perhaps some engineering training, some engineering projects could be done with this type of the tool, generative AI tools. But majority of engineering tools are proprietary and really difficult to be integrated into the ChatGPT type of the tool.
And I think also from the perspective of someone who teaches computer science and data science, what I've found that is most important for students is to learn to solve problems, to learn critical thinking skills. And when you think about coding, sometimes you can think about it as this tool to solve the problem, but what you need to form is the framework in which you can decide to solve the problems, or an approach to how to solve the problems. And I think that's what we really need to focus on training. The problem solving capacity of students I think of ChatGPT and the GPTs, particularly from in a coding aspect. I see it as generating small chunks of the answer, but you need to know the larger context of what you need to be doing. So you may need it to write this for loop, but what you need to know is that you do need a for loop. And so I think that the problem solving aspect is really something that we can even move forward to focusing on more, or even the analytics approach, focusing on that more than focusing on the very specific parts of a program.
Yeah, that's a good segue to a different question that we're all asked frequently. And so we might as well ask the question here. And the question revolves around how likely is it that AI is going to make obsolete a particular occupation? And I think of paralegals, and there are many others where there's highly repetitive tasks. There's data accumulation that needs to be examined. There's patterns that need to be found or predicted and so forth. What kind of repetitive jobs are likely at risk? And one answer that I typically give, and I stole this from somewhere, so I can't give proper attribution, but the idea of a physician, for instance, right? We're not going to see AI replace physicians, but AI, with the body of knowledge that it can have in the hands of a competent physician who is creative and who has a body of experience, is an invaluable tool. And it's going to be a much better physician that has access to this data and the ways in which an AI can interpret data than a physician who doesn't have access to that. And so when we think about, there's a question, how do we help medical students in a chat? Do you have to have non-medical professionals come in and work with faculty in med schools to think about training their medical students? That is what we did at the University of Florida. We have some really good AI hires that aren't MDs that are helping our faculty understand AI better and incorporate it in modules of existing courses, right? Anywhere you have a curriculum that's really tight and it's difficult to squeeze in entire new courses, this idea of creating a module that highlights an important facet of AI being used in a particular discipline, we've found to be very, very effective. What do you guys think about job loss? And what do you think about how we're altering our curriculum to adapt to these new tools that need to be learned?
I want to say one thing about this. There's been just a recent report that reports that 25 to 35% of the activities within educations, administrations, and legal would be automated. And when we say automated, it doesn't mean it will be mechanically automated. It's the decision-making process. At some point, somebody doesn't have to be a human making the decision. It's a machine-forced decision. If that trend is accurate, 25, 35%, even in education, it's quite scary. So I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if it's going to impact the workforce or who's going to be left out of the workforce. But one thing is sure, the business community is asking institutional higher learning basically to respond and to upskill or reskill or send people into the workforce work ready to this thing. So there is no longer this kind of probationary period where they can go in. So it's a big challenge for the university. So in this regard, I don't know what the answer is. Definitely create a new program, incorporate some of the things in our curriculum. But again, it goes back to the capacity and the threat of the entire institution of higher learning. So I just wanted to share this statistic with everybody.
Other thoughts?
I mean, it's already having an impact. I have colleagues in industry who have told me, particularly like in technical writing and those types of areas where they're hiring fewer people because their existing folks are able to have increased productivity as a result of using generative AI tools. And so, it's worth acknowledging. I don't know what the answer is. I think it's leaning towards, yes, it's absolutely going to have an impact because we're already seeing it. But I think it's worth acknowledging that all of our economic incentives right now are towards using a fixed cost AI or limited cost AI versus people. And so if that's not a future we want, then we would need to make some kind of a change.
In our an advisory board from the industry also share potentially number of software engineers might be reduced with this type of the tools for there. But like, little bit higher level for data scientists to really understand the storytelling, still like, we still have job there, right?
Another example is Duolingo already is using GPT-4 to assist in language learning. So, for example, is this going to lay off some language departments? And I think what we need to do at the university is instead of trying to fight it, adapt to leverage those AI-based tools to bring students further than we were able to bring them before. So, for example, instead of like in case of languages, instead of teaching simple language concepts and be done with this for one course, maybe in the same course we managed to go further and turn students into experts. And similarly in engineering, GPT-4 itself is not very useful yet for engineering, but once specialized tools become available, then it can be a different story. For example, Microsoft a Copilot for writing software, maybe some of the simple repetitive software that is written will eventually become automated, or maybe we might have help with debugging software, so that we then can concentrate on letting students write more complex software by using AI. And I expect similar things will happen in other engineering disciplines once the current engineering tools that people are using for their discipline, once those tools are augmented with AI capabilities.
And in thinking about the job loss situation, I'm always conflicted on this because when I think about some of the jobs where one might consider the task to be very repetitive, often I know that roles like these, people in these roles do much more than is written, that is on the paper. Like the repetitive tasks are really just a one part of what they do, but what they possess is something much greater than that. And so it's that part that I can see as being really, really helpful and transformative in academia and in industry. Instead of them being tethered to these repetitive tasks, they can really leverage their problem-solving skills, their ideas, their ways to revolutionize workflows. And I think it could be really exciting if we choose as a meta group to make policies and decisions that will enable this behavior, instead of just thinking that we can chop this job because it's these very specific tasks. It's almost never just those tasks, which makes someone successful.
Dr. Bell's comment reminds me of when the sewing machine first came to the state of Alabama and people freaked out because all these women who were working in the textile industry were like, oh no, we're going to get replaced. But what it actually did was increased, the amount of work that could be done, and it actually led to hiring many more people. And so you're right, maybe if we cut out the mundane parts of our jobs, there'll be a lot more interesting things that we can be working on. Good point.
I would like to add one more comment to this conversation. Yes, we're worrying about the job loss, but I think another challenge is what about people that get an education, get trained, and they can find a job? So I think we need to really rethink the way we prepare our students. We cannot afford to have a student for 4 years on our campuses and leave the university and not being able to basically, be part of this new transformation, digital transformation. So what is English? What is history? I think every discipline has to find a way to say, I think this is my thinking, it's good that you're an English major, but also learn the new tools, technology, because you will be required to have this kind of expertise. So we need to start rethinking about how this tool should be, part of a universal curriculum for our students. Otherwise, they won't be able to find a job, or they have difficulty to find a job.
Yeah, agreed. For existing workers, the University of Florida has come up with professional development courses. They happen to mirror our undergraduate certificate in AI. So there's a fundamentals of AI course, which requires, no computer programming experience to get started. The other required course is a course in AI ethics. We didn't talk a whole lot about that today, but it's worth noting, at least at UF, that's a required course for all of our undergrad certificates and minors and majors to come in and around AI and data science, this ethics course. And then for our upskilling, there's a third course that's kind of specific to a discipline, agriculture and life sciences, health and medical professions and things like that. So I do think finding those opportunities to direct existing workers to learn some AI skills and knowledge about how they can use that in their career to guard themselves against, any job cuts that may come in and enhance their ability to do their job, to be able to take on the problem-solving parts of their job or the more creative parts of their job, I think is something that we should be trying to do to the extent possible. So there was another interesting question that I thought was really cool, and that is, does the adoption of AI signal the end or the death of meta-analyses for academics? And after having read so many meta-analyses in the past few years, it just blew my mind that, oh gosh, here comes another potential, right? I don't think that's at all possible, right? But not in of itself, because there is that creativity in which we design a meta-analysis, and the questions that we propose to ask in that meta-analysis. I think, surely there are AI algorithms that can do the work of gathering and making inferences, but without the human creativity to ask the really pivotal questions, I hope that it doesn't come to that, because I do love a good meta-analysis. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? No, all right. That was just for me then.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about my experience for research method class. We teach students how to use Prisma, to look at scoping, or literature review. And I would say eventually, with proper training, that could achieve some certain level, but we still need humans to consolidate, the topics together. Yeah.
Indeed.
So the way AIs are trained, I don't think that it would be easy for an AI even to do a meta-analysis. AIs are trained on huge volumes of existing data, like bunches of books, web pages, Reddit conversations, and that training makes that neural network basically trying to simulate the types of sentence structure, the types of paragraphs, the types of conversations that it found out there. So the way I think of those tools like ChatGPT, it's basically autocomplete on steroids. So I start a conversation and then it imitates how other people in the past have had similar conversations like this and parrots that back at me. And this, I believe, is also the reason why ChatGPT invents fake citations. It has been trained that text includes citations, and if it is asked to provide citations, then well, it provides something similar to what it's seen before. It may not be factually correct. And in a meta-analysis, as you said, we need to use actual intelligence for making the comparisons, for designing a conceptual framework for how the different analyses compare to one another. And I think that is still beyond the reach of AI tools at this point.
Yeah, agreed.
Something to kind of segue onto here too is we're all kind of making the assumption that this is going to become widespread and wide use because Microsoft, Google, and a lot of other big tech companies are deploying this. What we're seeing though is when we see people actually acknowledging that they're using AI and generative AI in some sort of product, whether it's a meta-analysis or a publication, there's a potential bias within that from the reader that may actually cause the adoption of this technology to be slowed down. Certainly not going to keep pace with what Microsoft and Google are setting out there too. So you might want to keep in mind too that human beings are still very much so the end users of whatever is being produced by generative AI, whether it's a essay or something else, and they are going to have some level of bias into that if they do think a machine or an algorithm actually produced it versus a human being. So we are thinking about job loss, but we also might think about the fact too that if you can acknowledge and talk about a human being actually creating something, that might actually have even more value to certain companies and certain instances than just outsourcing that to an algorithm.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
But I wonder, Marc, if that's just a pendulum, that if we try to set up that challenge, we shouldn't set up that challenge, quite frankly, because these AI tools, will surpass, and then eventually people will change that bias and say, well, I prefer reading the stuff that's being done by this, not, ChatGPT 8.0 that's got a better ability to discern, the hundreds of thousands of different types of it. It's just the scope of the information that we're talking about, and just, it's going to surpass the capability of a human to do that work. And so there'll be a tool that allows us to do meta-analyses in a way. If you look at consensus.ai, it's a platform that's available right now that does similar kinds of work in terms of, analyzing scholarly published work and providing consensus in terms of what the data show across multiple papers and things like that. There are compelling things like that already. I think so I don't know if we should be seeking to set up a human versus AI challenges in any way. I think we should seek to be partners.
I'm not thinking about challenging. One thing I think you noted too, and consensus is actually a great example of this, is we don't actually have any data what this does to learning yet at all, because it's so new. We're also just assuming what's going to happen through this situation. I don't want to get us into a situation where we're obviously competing against AI, because that's a losing battle. But I also don't want us getting in a situation where we're basically creating a future that these big tech companies are basically saying, here it is, you must adopt this, you must upskill, you must basically constantly be upskilling to actually keep up with this. So I think we need to kind of think about this from a perspective of our students too, who are basically being on the receiving end of all this, and basically talk to them about different ways that they can basically navigate this landscape that's going to be a challenge too.
Yeah. But it's in Microsoft Word, right? And if our students turn in assignments with misspelled words or bad grammar, we count off because we expect them to use spell check. So then are we somehow saying that now we want to count off because you are using a tool in Microsoft Word? I think that's going to create, that's setting up a scenario that we have a hard time defending maybe. And so I think, I don't know what the answers are, but I think that there are, there's some compelling questions around, how do we incorporate the use of something like this? And the reality is, whatever their job, whatever their career ends up being, it's not going to be, they're not going to work for an employer that says you're not allowed to use generative AI. It's more likely to be, okay, you're going to do the work of 1.5 people because generative AI is a license of, we have XYZ number of licenses to all these generative AI tools that are available to you. And so how do we help them actually discern what are the best tools in their field, so they can take that as a competitive advantage when they're trying to seek those and building their careers.
Yeah,
I want to add a comment for that is the generative AI is definitely changed the body of knowledge right now, and it doesn't mean we'll replace the human, or especially like literature review or meta-analysis when we conduct this kind of research. I don't think generative AI will replace it. It's pretty much will empower our ability to do more better. To do better analysis, because even right now we do meta-analysis or literature review or systematic review. Even like we read a paper regarding systematic review, we not only look at what's the summary of knowledge, we always look at the discussion. We'd always look at the future work. What is the direction pointed out by the researchers, right? So that's the point. And then generative AI, they might be able to summarize that reasoning and generate some discussions, but The problem is that there might be numerous errors in those guided discussions for that. So it means that it still relies on us to examine that and also make decisions on that. So that's if at least at this point, if generator cannot solve this issue, like generate errors without warning, I don't think it will replace that. So that's kind of I even say that at this point we might need to do more work in systemic review and meta-analysis to make sure we have more guidelines about those errors generated by the ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, our time has drawn to a close. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you all for being here. Again, thanks to all our attendees. This has been a wonderful discussion. And I think if I had to summarize it in one way, it's let's start thinking about the fall semester and the courses that we teach and how we're going to incorporate conversations around generative AI and what we're going to do with our students to prepare them for what they're going to next. So Dr. McDonald, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you to all of our panelists. Actually, Dr. Reed, I'm going to ask you one question. I'm going to see if I can kick it to you a little bit. As we close out this discussion, I think it's also particularly helpful to think about AI and next steps, not just for the academy, but also for the economy. So as AI becomes more of a player in the research field and in the research world, how do you feel our universities, particularly within the SEC, are uniquely equipped to challenge or find solutions to problems within rural communities now with AI as a partner or as a help?
Yeah.
So I wanted to see if you could address just that, because we do have a unique footprint that I think we want to make sure we close out the discussion saying that community-based aspect that we all aim to work to feel gets addressed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you think about the Southeastern US, there is much that we can do to help the people that live in our region. One of the great promises of artificial intelligence is that it can be used to benefit those who have benefited the least, perhaps, over the past bunch of decades. So we have a saying at the University of Florida that we want AI to work for all, and really has two meanings. It's available to all, especially with tools like ChatGPT. It makes it even easier to utilize these tools than it was before that came out. But it's also for all, because if it isn't working for all of us and it's only working for a few of us, then we've not done the job right at all. And that's one of the reasons why we require the AI ethics course here at UF. So I think that it holds great promise. And the fact that our SEC universities have been meeting together for over a year and a half or more now, talking about AI at our institutions, learning from one another about what successes have looked like and how we can really help our students and help those in rural communities around our students. I think we have a leg up on everybody else right now. So let's keep it quiet that we're doing all of this wonderful work and sharing information. But let's think about it in the context of this rising tide needs to float all boats.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to you all. As the conference begins to promote additional programs across our conference and at individual institutions, I would like to challenge all of our viewers and participants and attendees today to continue to monitor our website, the SECU.com. On that website, there is an artificial intelligence consortium page that includes information about campus events, as well as additional events that we will host here in a virtual or in-person format through the conference. In addition to that, we have some exciting things coming in the fall for student competitions as it relates to AI, to additional programming. So we know that we are trying to meet the need of the moment. Thank you all for your time, your intelligence, your insight. For our attendees, thank you all for your interest in our scholars and in your interest in making the lives of our students and communities much better by having a greater understanding of artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI. I have a feeling that this will be a two-part discussion, if not more. So Dr. Reed and others, please stay tuned, because I think given the interest, we will have to continue the conversation. Hope you all have a wonderful day on behalf of the SEC and all 14 of our great universities.